All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is Matapilla, and once again, we are delving into the world of Magic the Gathering Arena. It is once again another historic deck. You might be thinking, why are you doing so many historic decks? Well, the answer is quite simple. Historic is awesome, but in more depth, in more depth, historic brings like standard decks of old back to relevance. Some like really fun decks I enjoy playing. I think there's quite a good amount of support from Wizards of the Coast for historic. There's also more scope for variety of decks. Standard is quite locked in of what's the meta. Yeah, you can build loads of other decks, but they might not be quite so competitive. Whereas with historic, I think there's more scope for trying new things and then being successful. So today we are doing devoted vampires or mono white vampires. The reason I'm doing this deck is because I used to play the Mono White Vampires deck from like the Ixalan days back a little while ago. 3, 4 years ago now? Probably 4 years ago. I'm trying to remember. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I really enjoyed that deck. It was kind of designed to fight the meta at the time in Standard. Not only that, it was just competitive in matchups anyway. I obviously have made some changes. I think there are some stronger cards you can use, and just added in some planeswalkers as well, just so that extra oomph. So the reason it's called Devoted Vampires and not Mono White Vampires is because we have Heliod Suncrowned. He's the only card that requires devotion in our deck. You could run the other devotion dude, Daxos. Is his name Daxos? Yeah, Daxos. There he is. You could run Daxos if you really wanted to. There's probably room for that in the sideboard or for like a tweak of this version of the deck, but let's get into what we have at the moment. So our 1-drops begin with 2 Duskborn Skymarcher, 1/1 with flying, and we can pay 1 white and tap to give target attacking vampire gets +1/+1. Kind of useful to keep that up, maybe just have that threat of making a 2/2, a 3/3, a 4/4, etc. Basically making our creatures bigger. We naturally have 4 Legions Landing. You want to run 4, yes, it's a legendary enchantment, yes, it's a legendary land. However, 1-drop creates a 1/1 vampire with lifelink. Yeah, okay, fine. But mainly we want to get it flipped so we can then start making tokens every turn. Nothing wrong with having 2 of these, sort of like in your opening hand. Play 1, create the vampire. You can always save the other Legion's Landing for later, or after the first one's flipped into Adanto, the first fort, you can play the second one just to create an extra vampire. It's not a big issue, but you need 4. Oh, where is it, Iva? Shush. You need 4 because you want to make sure you get this as early on as possible. Onto our 2-drops. We are running Adanto Vanguard. Adanto Vanguard is a great card. What's he up to? Silly boy. Adanto Vanguard is a great card because when he attacks, he gets +2/+0, and we can give him indestructible by paying 4 life, which we'll probably do more often than not. Obviously, keeping an eye on our life total. An odd one, he's not a vampire, or she is not a vampire. It's Aviary Mechanic. Yes, it's a dwarf, not a vampire. But when Aviary Mechanic enters the battlefield, we can return another permanent we control to its owner's hand. So we can play Legion's Landing on turn 1. Turn 2, Aviary Mechanic bounce Legion Landing back to then, on another turn, play it again to create another vampire token. We can also do that with Legion Conquistador, and just other bits and pieces that we might want to use or bring back to our hand, like things like Glass Casket or Banishing Light, Ixalan's Binding. Maybe they played something that is more important to get rid of, so we can do that. Maybe 4 is not the right number, it's just that the original deck that this is based on ran 4, so I want to give it a go. We're running 1 Glass Casket. Not so sure about this in the deck, but there's a lot of pesky mono-red aggro decks and elves decks that need to kind of shut their early plays down. So Glass Casket does a good job of that. Our next one is Paladin of Atonement. We have 2 of these because at the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life last turn, put +1/+1 counter on Paladin of Atonement. When he dies, gain life equal to its toughness. This is pretty good against burn decks, because burn we're going to be losing life, and having that extra little bit of life gain is kind of useful. Plus he's a vampire, so we can use things like Dustborn Skymarcher to tick him up. Onto our 3-drops. Got Banishing Light, 2 copies of Banishing Light. Pretty much does what it says, banishes stuff. It's 3-drop enchantment to exile non-land permanent and opponent controls. As previously mentioned, 2 Heliod Suncrowned. That possibility to give a creature lifelink is great, and then ticking up our creatures with tokens also good. 4 Legion Conquistador, because we can basically just keep creatures in our hands to keep playing, which is great, and that links well with Ketra's Monument. White spells cost 1 to cast, and whenever we cast a creature spell, we create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. The changes are we put some planeswalkers in, we put 2 Basri Ket, we can make our dudes bigger, and then we can make tokens. Basically, pretty good standard stuff. And we've got Gideon Black Blade. So he becomes a 4/4 creature each turn. We can just swing in every turn with him. We can also give our creature a creature of our choice, Vigilance, Lifelink, or Indestructible, which is great. Ticking him up to 6, we can exile a non-land permanent. More removal in the forms of Cast Out and Ixalan's Binding. And then we've got 1 God Eternal Ode Ketra. Now, we have a Ketra in here over the Angel of Invention, because we cast quite a lot of creatures, so we can make lots of zombies. Pretty much it. And Devil Strike, always good. That's basically it. For the creatures and spells, our lands are 2 Castle Ardent Vale. We can again make some more tokens. 15 planes, 4 Sheffet Dunes. We can just sacrifice it to give a creature +1/+1, or all creatures, sorry, +1/+1. And Mobilize District, because sometimes it's nice to be able to have an extra blocker or attack with just to finish off our opponents. I haven't tested this deck out yet, so I can't really say how strong it is. There are definitely more vampires you could include. Like, let's just take a look. I think like Skymarcher Aspirant is also very good in this deck. I used to run that in the standard version when I played it. Just the 2/1 for 1 is pretty decent, and then you can gain the City's Blessing pretty easily with this deck, so it's quite nice. Would play that over Dustborn Skymarcher, or possibly just a couple of them anyway on top of. You could possibly take out Glass Casket and maybe add in another Paladin of Atonement. We can make sure that we've got Not Collected as well. Yeah, Maverick Fane is also a very good card to have in this deck. The reason it's not is because I don't have any and don't want to spend any tokens. Although, I've only got 6 rare. Don't really want to spend 4 or 3 of them on Maverick Fane, when essentially Basri Ket does the same thing. -2, and then whenever one more non-token creatures attack this turn, create that many 1/1 white soldiers. Yes, it doesn't create vampires, but it creates more tokens. So I put Basri Ket in instead of Maverick Fane, and then a Gideon Black Blade instead of a 3rd Basri Ket. But if you want to go down a more vampire route, you could. You could definitely also play Metallic Mimic as a sort of pseudo-lord for the vampires in this deck. You could also splash black and play the actual lord. Where are we? Vampire. Legion Lieutenant. So you could splash a bit black to play Legion Lieutenant. Yeah, I wouldn't play Cleric of Life's Bond, but yeah, you could splash a bit black for Legion's Lieutenant. And then there's also some black vampires you could also put in. But yeah, like you could also put in Vona, Butcher of Magan. You could play Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord. You could also play the other Sorin. So you could go other ways, like by splashing some black. Other things you could include. What's on my sideboard? What did I put in there? Oh, Idol of Endurance. Just a good way to like put in against like a control deck that's board wiping us, we can just play Idol of Endurance and keep bringing those creatures back, essentially. So when Idol of Endurance enters the battlefield, exile all creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from our graveyard until Idol of Endurance leaves the battlefield. You can pay 2 and tap it to cast a single, like just one of those creatures that's been exiled with Idol of Endurance without paying its mana cost. Which is quite good. If you look at it, the majority of our deck is 3 mana and under, and we've only got one creature that costs more than 3 mana, so happy with that. Again, this is mainly built for a best of 1. Just I like to put cards in for a sideboard for ideas for when I make a best of 2 of these decks. What else could you put in? I mean, Forerunner of the Legion is always pretty good, but I wouldn't necessarily choose that. Bishop of Binding for some more removal, but like removal on a stick. But again, we've got Ixalan's Binding, which does a better job of that. And then our vampires start costing quite a lot up this end. But then again, you can splash black for maybe Vicious Conquistador, Blood Artist, Knight of the Ebon Legion, some weenie guys. Gifted Aetherborn, but then it's less of a splash, making 2 black on turn 2. Null Priest of Oblivion. But again, like not looking too hard into that because it's a mono white vampires deck. Did also run Angels. Angel. Originally, or like the standard version of this deck back in the day did run Angel of Invention in the main board. 5 mana for a 2/1 with Flying Vigilance and Lifelink. Fabricate 2, so we could either give it +2/+1/1 counters, or create 2 servos. But all of the creatures got +1/+1, which is pretty cool. But I chose to go with God Eternal Oketra over Angel of Invention. I'm interested to see how this plays in Historic. I think it'll do pretty good. We can get quite a lot of dudes on the board, make a lot of tokens, gain a bit of life. Just play quite aggressive with things like a Dante Vanguard. Got a fair bit of removal. And things that like definitely need dealing with, like Gideon Blackblade, Basri Cat. They're targets that'll have to be dealt with. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the deck. We'll do some gameplay with it at some point. Until then, that is me tuning out.